From creepy episodes like The Empty Child to psychological torment from midnight, Doctor Who has always balanced its family-friendly tone with some good old-fashioned scares. Or has it? Over the last few years, the show seems to have shifted, and now it feels like no child is watching from behind the sofa. That is, if they're even watching at all. This is Doctor Who, Why It Needs to Be Scary Again. Before we can dive into the problems, we need to understand what exactly scares mean for Doctor Who as a show. Now, I'm well aware that I'm probably never going to be scared of this show again. I am 25 years old, I am scared of taxis and Nigel Farage, and I also have a dodgy back. I'm not getting behind the sofa for nothing. Though this doesn't mean that I'm oblivious to what scares children. Believe it or not, I used to be one. I remember being 4 years old when this show returned with Christopher Eccleston as the lead, and I adored it. Became obsessed kinda overnight for so many reasons. I love the actors, the characters, the magic of the TARDIS and time travel. I adored the monsters, I love a monster, and the scares they provided. However, most importantly, I think I liked feeling grown up. This was something different from the Disney films and daytime telly. This was something I could watch with my mum and dad and see their enjoyment as well. There weren't any fake laughs to try and make me happy, they were having fun watching too. It was the definition of family viewing. And as the weeks progressed, so did our traditions. We'd always get pick and mix from Woolworths. I'd have a squash, mum would have a wine, and we'd sit and indulge on sweets and this week's adventure. However, a few times my parents would be left to watch it alone as I ran up the stairs screaming bloody murder, especially when this fucking freak came on screen. But I still adored it. And although Doctor Who wasn't a horror show, you were guaranteed at least a couple of scares a season that pushed the boundaries of tea time viewing. The Gelf, gas mask zombies, Satan and this creepy boy in a cage, the Weeping Angels. The Weeping Angels are one of the most recognisable villains of the show, and they're scary. They could be monsters in their own horror film franchise. Doctor Who is really lucky to have them. Occasionally the horror would turn more psychological, such as fan favourite episode Midnight. This is a horror through and through, exploring the darkness of humanity and the power of words. It's not blood-soaked or jump scare heavy, but there's a constant creepiness for most of the runtime. And this episode is followed by Turn Left. Horror? No, but full-on drama with a violent darkness pulsing throughout. Episodes such as Dark Water are child-friendly, but they're not for children, as it explores death, leading to one of the creepiest lines in the show's history.
Don't cremate me!
Over 100 people complained to the BBC about this episode. And yeah, 100 is nothing compared to the millions of people who tuned in, but still, for a long time it was the most complained about episode since 2000. Take a breath. Since 2005. And I love that, pushing boundaries. It's dark, creepy, kids, teens and adults could feel a chill from that line, and that's good storytelling if you can affect multiple generations watching. And we could keep looking forward, but let's travel back in time. 1963, The Daleks, a story that would change the course of the show forever. Sidney Newman didn't want this story, he wanted to avoid what he called bug-eyed monsters, and yet, this is the story that grew the show's audience. Over the course of 7 weeks, news of the Daleks spread, and the show's audience increased by 50%. Suddenly, this show was about monsters and scares just as much as it was about an old time traveller. And I know audiences have changed, we're talking about the 60s. A lot is different, but children's imaginations haven't changed. They still like scares and horror and monsters and heroes. And the phrase watching from behind the sofa became popular due to this show. And I don't think that phrase should be seen as a silly thing. For me, that's the slogan. That's the calling card. That's the promise you're making to each new generation of viewers who tune in. And it's a promise that has recently been broken. So, why am I making this video now? As a freelancer, I have a lot of different jobs to help me afford food and the occasional / very regular alcoholic beverage. One of these jobs is teaching drama for 6 hours on a Saturday, with the ages ranging from 6 all the way to 18. And I'm telling you now, if you want to feel old, spend a few hours in a room with 30 kids. You won't understand a word. What the fuck is Skibbity Toilet? I don't know, I don't want to know. Shut up, child. However, recently I was discussing TV shows with them and I asked if they watched the recent series of Doctor Who, to which one girl said possibly the most cutting comment I've heard about the show recently. She said, "No, that's for kids." And this girl is 10, a 10-year-old, and all the other kids agreed. Some had never even heard of the show. They don't play it in the playground, they don't want to do it in drama because it is, and I quote, too childish. Now, this is just one group's opinions. I'm not saying a whole generation of kids think this, but I do think it's quite telling. These kids are the perfect age to become obsessed with this show. It's time travel, monsters, adventure, action, robots and spaceships, and yet they couldn't care less. And I don't want to hear it's because they're always on their phones or because they've got TikTok, because I'm sorry, that's lazy critique. These kids watch TV, they are always talking about the latest show or film they're obsessed with. And if you think it is because they're on their phone and TikTok, blah 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 blah, well then why aren't they watching if this era is so obsessed with making content? Either way, you failed to grab their attention. And if I'm honest, I'm not surprised that kids have this opinion of the show. They didn't have the luxury of growing up with episodes such as Blink or The Waters of Mars. Blink is nearly 20 years old, that's not the current show anymore. Instead, the recent two eras have been very light, very pretty, delicate and careful. Doctor Who has a lot of magic and whimsy, and that's great, but that lightness needs something to bounce off of. There needs to be something to contrast it. There needs to be threat and scares for our heroes to feel heroic. Now, you could argue there's been a few attempts over the last few years to do the scary one, and we'll get into that in a minute, but first, let's dive into the recent era and explore the lack of spooks. Let's start with Christmas. We could start with the 60th, but I'm starting with this one because I want to. It's Shruti's first proper episode as the Doctor. I don't think Christmas has to be scary. I think a light fun romp is fine for a Doctor Who Christmas special. I am surprised we haven't ever had a proper gothic Christmas ghost story yet. BBC, I will write it for you. I've got ideas, but it's not necessary. However, that being said, a little bit creepy does go a long way. 2005's Christmas Invasion isn't scary, but it has some pretty dark imagery. The people standing at the edge of the buildings, the blood control stuff, this creepy guy, I mean he looks like he stinks. I argue this is quite a lot for Christmas Day, definitely the building stuff, that imagery is very evocative. Voyage of the Damned gives us killer angels and people dying, death on Christmas Day. They're not becoming a star for baby Jesus, they're boiling at the bottom of a spaceship on Christmas. The church on Ruby Road shies away from any such imagery or darkness. There's drama, I'll give it that. The scene where Carla can't remember Ruby is good, but there's no scares or spooks to be had. Give me creepy goblins. Honestly, have them eat some baby stew. It's Christmas Day with pirate goblins that eat children. Why is it all so bright and careful? A new generation of viewers may have adored it if it played into this creepy weirdness, but instead we get this.
Good to say how diddly did you?
Partner that with a pop singing goblin and the Doctor saving Davina McCall with a wink to the camera, and it all feels very clean and twee. And maybe this sounds harsh because it is Christmas after all, but things don't exactly improve. Space Babies is one of the most confusing pieces of telly I've seen, and each rewatch I become more and more confused by its existence. Though I will say one thing in its defence, having the bogeyman being made of actual bogies could have actually been good. I know some of you will think that's insane, but hear me out. That's gross, that's fucking grim, and that could have been horrible if it was played for those gross spooks rather than comedy. The idea is already silly, so you need to subvert the expectations. It needs to be played like this scene in Alien 3. The show gives itself the challenge, can it make bogey scary? It's a ridiculous challenge to set yourself, and not one I'd ever recommend doing for an opening of a season, but that's the challenge they set, and then they back out of it. And then we get stuff like this.
Why did I run?
Because it was scary.
Which one? Bad exposition. We shouldn't need to be told that something is scary, we should feel it, but secondly, why? Because it wasn't scary. They hug like they're in Scooby-Doo and run away, it's not treated like a horror scene. It doesn't have the visual spooks or horrific tension. And this happens throughout the entire episode. We're told something is terrifying while the story plays out like a comedy, ending with a farting spaceship. As the 10-year-old said, it's so childish, and it's hard to disagree with that. Also, although I think the bogey-made bogeyman could have worked if played and directed right, I think it's a shame he's wasted like this. The bogeyman is a mythical creature that can be found in many cultures around the world. The stories change slightly, like most folktales do, but usually it's a figure that is used to scare children into good behaviour. It's the, you need to go to bed now or the bogeyman will get you, and this isn't used at all during the episode, and I don't understand why. There's a whole episode, perhaps a two-parter, surrounding the lore and the myth of the child-stealing monster. In a lot of Latin American countries, the bogeyman is known as the sack man, who, as the name suggests, has massive bollocks. A few people keep telling me I need to cut my giggling out. No, fuck you. That made me laugh too much. I'm keeping it in. And no, okay, it's called a sack man because he puts children in sacks. It has nothing, has nothing to do with his big bollocks. In Brazilian folklore, there's a creature called the Cuca who makes children's soup. Even in the UK, there's tons of bogeyman tales, Tom Duncan, Peg Powler, and nearly all these tales come with a warning to children. The warning is either to behave or not go out late at night. These are stories that parents told children. They are meant to scare kids. That's a great Doctor Who story. I'll write it. BBC, I'll write it. Please. I love folktales. And okay, RTD's openers have always been quite fun and friendly, but I would argue this is the first one that doesn't have anything slightly unsettling. Even Partners in Crime, a very comedy-focused episode, has the scene where Stacey's stomach starts moving as little blobs of fat break away before she blows up. And it's not played for creepiness, but it still has a threat, it's got stakes, and it's still odd, and she's genuinely terrified. Her fear isn't played for laughs or portrayed as cartoony, she begs for help and then pops. And it's this that's missing, the menacing beneath the lightness. Take the Slovene for example, they're funny, they explode when you put vinegar over them, but strip that away and they're aliens that skin people and wear that skin as their own. It's the zip on the forehead, the bright blue light, the noise that it makes as they unzip. It's all unnerving and our characters are all genuinely scared of them. I just feel like everything in this era is a little too clean, too nice, nothing's gross enough or creepy enough. And I know I said I wouldn't be scared of Doctor Who anymore, but you could still definitely try and get the adults nervous. Many people are scared of clowns and spiders and the dark. Play on those phobias. Do something Doctor Who-y with the most basic of fears. And I know I'm being harsh on this era, but the Jodie Chibnall era was the same. Very clean, very careful. We actually have an episode about giant spiders, but they don't go for it enough. It doesn't push it as far as it could have gone, instead we spend more time with Pantomime Trump than we do with the oversized monsters. And I find it interesting that one of Jodie's most praised episodes is this one, and it's using horror tropes. It's having fun with its genre visually, playing with shadows and the sudden lightning. Its villain looks scary and the vibe never lets up when he's on screen. And lastly, before we move on, one of my main issues right now is I don't know who the show is for anymore. I don't think it's aiming for that kid audience because it's not treating them like adults, which is something that kids like, especially if they're going to be watching it with the family. But it's also definitely not for adults. The people that have grown up with the show are now old, boring sods, but the show's not tailored to them. It's actually more childish than it was when they were watching as children. The vibes are off, the tone is inconsistent. I don't get it. I don't get it. It would be unfair of me to suggest that there hasn't been any attempts to deliver tea time spooks within the new era. If we focus on the 60th just for a minute, Wild Blue Yonder does quite a good job at bringing body horror to the show, and tonally the episode is pretty consistent, apart from the Mavity joke opening that feels like a scene from a completely different story. Plus, in The Giggle there's some nice creepy ideas, however again, I do think these could have been pushed further, it's being very careful still. In season 1, we get the controversial episode 73 Yards. I call it controversial because while some fans adore it, others fail to see the hype. I'm kind of in between, I love some bits, I think a lot of the ideas are incredibly solid, however other parts just leave me completely cold. The horror angle of this episode is so nearly good, it almost gets it right, but it's not as unsettling as I think it should have been. The first half definitely feels more in tone with that folklore premise. The Welsh countryside looks great, the slightly stormy sky with the grey clouds and the faraway woman dressed completely in black. Again, I wish they went further, give me some proper woman in black-esque imagery, but whatever. My issue is, as the episode progresses, the horror tone switches, and even though the episode is exploring dark themes, it looks so clean, so bright, and doesn't inflict that dread that I want. Now this is a personal thing, but it does take me out of the episode. I still like it, don't get me wrong, I personally think it's one of the strongest of the era. However, I'd argue it doesn't count towards being a scary one, and not scary in the way the show needs at least. Also, if you're gonna do an episode like this, it needs to have a few stories with amazing monsters before, and bogies and drag queens and an ambulance don't cut it. Honestly, the scariest thing about season 1 is this fucking noise. That is a noise that just evokes dread. This noise promises danger and scares, and probably is the scariest part of the final two-parter. Unless you've got a fear of sand, in that case this one would have fucked you up. Season 2's episode 3, titled The Well, is probably this era's only other attempt at delivering that tea time horror show. I like The Well, some of my opinions have changed on this season after a rewatch, but I still think this episode is pretty strong, with a solid script, performances and directing style. And for the most part, I think it delivers on that creepy bottle episode it sets out to be. I can't help but think it could have gone further. Something about the guards just being yeeted through the air feels a little too comical for me. I think they could have done something weirder and more visually interesting, but hey, I'm being picky. But then again, maybe I'm not. I feel like this with nearly every episode this era, there's something always holding it back, as if it doesn't want to fully commit to its own premise. A cartoon comes to life, but it doesn't really do much. Unit has a dark side, but nothing that questionable happens that stops us liking the characters too much. And I think being careful is actually the issue.
She was originally, in your very first draft, she was a lot more dead. There was a lot of pushback from us being wimps. Saying, should she be dying?
I just had her face down in the mud. You've gone soft.
You
have gone soft.
You've gone soft was said.
That kinda tells me a lot. Now I don't know if this was a Disney choice or bad wolf in the BBC, and honestly either way it doesn't really matter. The show's gone soft. The same show that once had a child being dragged under the Thames and the lead hero barely showing any feeling now won't allow one of the leads to look too dead. A character that we know won't die because it's so early on in the run. And adults don't want to watch something that feels too airy, too soft, but neither do children. Kids don't want to be talked down to, and they're not stupid, they can feel when someone is treating them like a child. And if the writers are being asked to tone down the most basic of stuff, it does make me wonder what wouldn't be allowed now. Would Don't Cremate Me be cut? Would the Flood still have their cracked lips? Would the Weeping Angels, one of the show's most iconic villains, be deemed too scary to air? Now obviously I don't know if any of this is correct, but it is interesting to think about. Well, first they need to recommission the show for another season. You can't fix the cancelled show, so if they could pull their finger out and do that, that would be great. But when it does come back, it needs to be unapologetically daring. I think it needs to trust its audience more and stop undercutting anything slightly dark with a Marvel-esque quip. Allow the comedy one to be the comedy one and the horror one to be as creepy as 7pm will allow. Honestly, if it was up to me, I'd have Doctor Who embrace the gothic horror genre. It would still be sci-fi, still whimsical and magical, but with an emphasis on the macabre. Think grim fairy tales and evil shadow puppets. I'd want monsters that audiences cower away from until the credits roll, and then kids want to play as that monster before bedtime. Think gross skin and dead eyes along with the time travel magic. Mary Whitehouse would be turning in her grave, and quite rightly so. And if you don't already know, I will be putting my money where my mouth is. I'm currently working on a video titled I Wrote a Doctor Who Episode, where I will break down the script I write, show my writing process, and upload the script online for people to read and judge to their heart's content. Unfortunately, this video is taking a little longer than I would have liked due to me accidentally deleting the whole file of the script. I was very angry. So I'm having to start again, but it's a horror and I've titled it The Refusal to Rot. So if you want to see that video, please do subscribe, it should be soon. And finally, if the show was up to me, I would make Watch From Behind the Sofa the draw of the show. Not just a tagline, not just a slogan, but the promise that would never, ever be broken.